What's good, people? I'm back, and today I want to talk about the light heavyweight division and the dilemma it is in. Now, from the thumbnail, you guys might have guessed or had a decent idea as to what the dilemma is. But if you didn't catch it, if you didn't get it from the thumbnail, I'll tell you guys. The dilemma is that the belt will be shifting hands in between three people and three people only. That's just how the state of the light heavyweight division is. And obviously, those three people are Magomed Ankalaev, Carlos Ulberg, and Yuri Prohaska. Now, Carlos Frodberg is obviously the champion right now. Magomed Ankalaev just won last week, and Yuri Prohaska, yeah, I don't know what the fuck he's doing. Now, first of all, we have to kind of understand what the dilemma is, right? What do I mean by there's a dilemma? It's a rock, paper, scissors ass matchup, dude. It's a fucking rock, paper, scissors matchup. That's literally what the dilemma means. Because Yuri Prohaska, the way he fights, like somebody with very clean striking and very simple, very classic kickboxing kind of style, is always gonna be the kind of guy to beat Yuri Prohaska. Somebody like Carlos Ulberg. That's why I think even without the fucking knee injury, Carlos Ulberg had a very decent chance of beating Yuri Prohaska. That's literally why Alex Pereira beat him. A style like Alex Pereira, similar to Alex Pereira, beats Yuri Prohaska. Now, the thing with Ankalaev is Yuri Prohaska has a style that's supposed to be Ankalaev. Except for the grappling, that part might be a bit concerning. But people forget, man, Yuri Prohaska is actually a good grappler. Yuri Prohaska's jiu-jitsu is actually competent. Yuri Prohaska is actually competent at jiu-jitsu. And the reason I think Yuri Prohaska has a style made to beat Ankalaev, anytime Ankalaev has gotten pressured in his fucking life, he just breaks. He just breaks. That's literally what it is. When you make the fight chaotic, when you make the fight very hectic at a very high pace, that's just not Ankalaev's game. Ankalaev wants a clean, striking boxing match. He's not getting that with Yuri Prohaska. That's why I think Yuri Prohaska is such a bad matchup for Ankalaev. Because he fucking breaks. Anytime Ankalaev has gone up against guys like that, to make the fight very gritty and dirty, he has struggled. Alex Pereira in the first fight, he kind of got stuck on the feet, got a little bit timid. And that's why he lost. Yuri Prohaska, from what we have seen till now, has a style made to beat Ankalaev. Obviously, the one caveat being Yuri Prohaska's striking defense is kind of ass, but Yuri Prohaska possesses more power on the feet. Yuri Prohaska can tank some of Ankalaev's shots because he has a good chin. Obviously, that left hook from hell that Ulberg unleashed on him is a different matter. And obviously, Ankalaev doesn't really, telegraph his shots. That might be another problem, that Yuri Prohaska might catch a straight shot on the chin because Ankalaev doesn't really telegraph his shots, unlike somebody like Khalil Rountree, who really telegraphs his shot, really wins overhands from his hips, right? That's why Yuri Prohaska didn't get knocked out in that fight, because he was just seeing the shots coming, dude. It was just so easy to see shots coming for Yuri Prohaska in that fight. Now, obviously, the way Yuri Prohaska fights, he's gonna break Ankalaev. That's literally how it is. And Yuri Prohaska has decent grappling. And Yuri Prohaska, if he can somehow manage to stop the takedowns of Ankalaev, which will be even easier if he pressures Ankalaev, right? The way Ankalaev fights, he wants to be out at space. He wants to counter you while you guys are out at space, and he wants to move a lot and stuff like that. He wants to use that speed advantage. But when you back him up, when you pressure the shit out of him, and when you make the fight a gritty, dirty kind of fight, like a very high pace, I get hit, you get hit kind of fight, he fucking breaks. Especially because he doesn't have power. Ankalaev doesn't have thud in his shots. Yuri Prohaska has thud in his shots and a better chin than Ankalaev. And the way Yuri Prohaska fights, that's just gonna help him land those kind of shots on Ankalaev. And that's why I think he's such a bad matchup for Ankalaev. Obviously, if he can manage to stop the takedowns, which will be easier if he, with the pressure, combined with the pressure. Now, I've gone over as to why Yuri Prohaska is such a bad matchup for Ankalaev. Ankalaev is such a bad matchup for Ulberg. We have seen this, like I said. We have seen this before with Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira's very similar fighting style to Ulberg. He beat Yuri Prohaska because that's the kind of style Yuri Prohaska loses to. And he also lost to Ankalaev the first time. That's just the kind of style Ankalaev beats. Ankalaev, also, Carlos Ulberg is not as good of a grappler as Alex Pereira is. So Carlos Ulberg is not even as good of a grappler as Yuri Prohaska is. So Ankalaev has the way to win that fight via grappling. And both of these guys fight at space, very technical kind of, pretty kind of fight. Like a very technical, out at space, fainting at range kind of fight. And Ankalaev, there's no one better than that than Ankalaev. That's Ankalaev's A game. That's literally what he does. That is what he does. That is what he flipping does. And Carlos Frodberg, after, if he just fights the way he's fighting and he's been fighting, he's gonna lose to Ankalaev. Stylistically, it's just not a good matchup for Carlos Frodberg. And obviously, combined with the threat of the grappling, Carlos Ulberg loses to Ankalaev. Because Carlos Ulberg is not as good of a boxer, there's not a person in this division that's a better striker than Ankalaev right now. There was Alex Pereira, he moved up to heavyweight. Carlos Ulberg's striking is it leaves a little bit to be desired. That's all I'll say. Because Carlos Ulberg's boxing he comes from like a kickboxing background, right? You see these guys come from kickboxing backgrounds like Pereira and Ulberg and guys like that, right? They don't really have as good of boxing fundamentals and as good of boxing defense and stuff like that as compared to somebody that has been training MMA, but they focus heavily on their boxing, like Ankalaev. And that's why Ankalaev kind of beats these kind of kickboxing kind of guys. That's literally what he does. If you want to stay on the feet with him and exchange punches, it's going to be a problem. Now, I think Ankalaev does have a major weakness to head kicks because the guy does not block head kicks properly. And I've gone over this before, right? But I just don't think Carlos Ulberg is the guy to exploit that because Ankalaev, the threat of the grappling will be so much for Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg backs up. And when you back up against Ankalaev, that's literally you're playing into his game. Carlos Ulberg in his fights never really pressured. Doesn't really pressure. If you aren't pressuring the shit out of Ankalaev, and I mean pressuring the shit out of Ankalaev, like a Yuri Prohaska kind of pressure, like a Alex Pereira in the second fight kind of pressure. If you aren't able to pull that off, you're fucked against Ankalaev. That's just the fact of the matter. And Carlos Ulberg doesn't do that. Carlos Ulberg backs up. Carlos Ulberg counters you on the back foot. And that's why I think it's such a bad matchup. I think Magomed Ankalaev fucking destroys Carlos Ulberg. Now, obviously, we've gone over as to why this is triangle kind of matchup, a rock, paper, scissors kind of matchup, where Ulberg beats Yuri beats Ankalaev, Ankalaev beats Ulberg. And we have gone over as to why it's happening and why stylistically that's what's happening. That's what's happening. Fuck, dude. I really need to learn how to fucking speak. I might have a speech impediment, dude. Anyways, now that we've gone over that, I do think that Ankalaev versus Yuri, out of all of the matchups you can make between these three, is probably the closest fight. But I would still favor Yuri to win that matchup. I would still favor Yuri Provider to win that matchup. Now the thing with Little Hank is his grappling is massively overrated. People believe that he's a wrestler. He's not a wrestler. Okay? The guys he's grapple fucked are fucking Jan Blachowicz, who has shown a hole in his grappling. Defensive grappling, not offensively. Offensively, he's a good grappler. And Bogdan Guskov, who is ass cheeks. Other than that, when have you ever seen Ankalaev straight up grapple fuck somebody? Not a single competent grappler. Alex Pereira was able to defend all of Ankalaev's takedowns. He's not a good wrestler or a grappler by any means. So this idea that he can just rule over the division is kind of crazy. I do think he beats Ulberg, but obviously Yuri Prohaska is a stylistic nightmare for Ankalaev. Now, why is this happening? Why is the division in kind of the state it is? For one, the one main reason being Alex Pereira left the division. If Alex Pereira was still at light heavyweight, obviously he would beat Ulberg, Yuri, and Ankalaev. He would beat all three of these guys, right? Because Alex Pereira moved up to heavyweight, that kind of made a power vacuum. And it happens, right? When a very long-reigning, a very dominant champion kind of leaves the division, it kind of leaves the division in a very weird place. And it can cause stuff like this to happen where these fucking rock, paper, scissors matchup arise, right? This has happened before. And that brings me to my next point. There's literally no other division except for light heavyweight facing this dilemma, right? Either they have proper champions or they have like a number one or number two kind of guy thing. The closest division that comes to this is middleweight. Let's go over the divisions really quickly. Flyweight, obviously there's Pantoja, and obviously there's VAN as champions. There's a number one, number two kind of situation. There's not really a triangle of belt, the belt going from one person to another. There's not really that happening. At bantamweight, Piotr Jan is a very dominant champion, and he's gonna be a dominant champion. There is a triangle that you can make between Piotr Jan, Umar, and Merab, but Merab already beat Umar, and I think stylistically, Umar could beat Merab in a rematch because the first fight was so close. There's a very good possibility that Piotr Jan beats Umar. There's not really a triangle forming there, right? That doesn't really exist at bantamweight. At, at featherweight, there's obviously Volkanovski, but once Volkanovski leaves, we might see another triangle upcoming between guys like Evloev, Diego Lopez, and Jean Silva. But I think Diego Lopez, except for Jean Silva, I don't think there's anyone that's good enough to beat Diego Lopez. There's just not. I think Diego Lopez beats Movsar in a rematch. Volkanovski retires, that might leave the division in kind of a state where another kind of rock, paper, scissors triangle does form, but very highly unlikely. And right now, it just doesn't exist at all because Volkanovski is the champion and he beats pretty much fucking everybody. Except for maybe Jean Silva. Maybe. That's the closest fight for Volkanovski, right? Obviously, at lightweight, it doesn't really exist. There was Ilia Topuria. Lightweight doesn't have, a rock, paper, scissors triangle. It's just completely fucked because how is Justin Gaethje the champion and how is Ilia Topuria lost to Justin Gaethje? And that's put the division in such a horrible place. There's not even a triangle forming. It's just a clusterfuck of a million things. And it's just completely fucked. It might be worse than the fucking triangle dilemma. It's in an even worse situation than light heavyweight, to be fair. But it is exciting. I'll say that. At welterweight doesn't really exist. If Makhachev were to retire, if Makhachev beats Ian Gary, that dilemma just doesn't exist. But if Makhachev were to retire or lose to Ian Gary, and if he were to retire after beating Ian Gary, the dilemma, there's a very solid chance that it exists. But it's not between the guys you think it will be. It will be between Ian Gary, Gabriel Bonfim, and Michael Morales. Those are the three guys that will form that fucking triangle. And I think there's not really a triangle to be formed. Because Michael Morales is a fucking problem. The only kind of triangle I can think of is Ian Gary beats Carlos Prates beats Michael Morales beats Ian Gary. That's kind of the only triangle I can think of. But the reason I don't think that triangle has a chance of existing, or I wouldn't put much faith behind it, is because stylistically, compared to a situation like light heavyweight, fights are much closer, right? At light heavyweight, I can confidently say this guy beats this guy and this guy beats that guy. At welterweight, it's kind of hard to say because the fights are so close, right? And another reason is Michael Morales himself. Michael Morales will completely fuck over the triangle dilemma idea of the welterweight division. Because Michael Morales, he has good grappling. Here's the thing, right? Michael Morales on the feet, he's a fucking problem. He does have spotty defense, I'll say that. His defense can be a bit lacking, his technique's a bit whatever. The only two guys that I might consider have a chance against him is Gabriel Bonfim and Ian Gary. Because Ian Gary is a good grappler, and on the feet, he's better than Michael Morales. He's more technical than Michael Morales. Obviously, there's a huge problem that he has short T-Rex arms and that he doesn't have any pop behind his shots. So I would pick Michael Morales to beat him solely because of that reason. Because, yeah, he's better, but is it enough to make up for the deficiency in his reach and his fucking power? Probably not. And Michael Morales, he doesn't have to worry about the threat of the grappling. Neither does Ian Gary though. But if anything, Ian Gary has to be more worried in that fight than Michael Morales. That's why I would favor Michael Morales in that matchup. Once again, against Gabriel Bonfim, he's probably a better grappler than Gabriel Bonfim. I know Gabriel Bonfim defended shots from Belal Muhammad, but I think at this point we can establish Belal Muhammad is ass at grappling. Belal Muhammad's style has been figured out, and obviously if you're really tall and lanky and you can kind of stop the pressure of Belal Muhammad, he just isn't able to get in on any takedowns. That's literally what happened. And Belal Muhammad just looked kind of dog shit in that fight. And I think on the feet, Gabriel Bonfim, there's a chance he gets knocked the fuck out by Michael Morales. And other than those two guys, literally nobody else beats him. It's not Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates on the feet is genuinely a nightmare. like his fucking nickname says, Carlos Prado is the best striker in the welterweight division. Make no mistake about it. But his grappling deficiency is such a huge glaring hole that a guy like Michael Morales would just take him down and submit him. That's literally how it is. So I don't think there's a triangle at welterweight. The middleweight now comes really close to this triangle because there's DDP who beat Sean Strickland beat Chimaev, Chimaev beats DDP. But is there really a triangle at middleweight though? Because there's contenders rising up at middleweight. You have guys like Gregory Rodriguez coming up. You have fucking Joe Pyfer, Kai Borrallo, Imavov. All of these guys play a massive role into the title picture. Light heavyweight. Beside those three guys, there's nobody in the title picture at light heavyweight. But at middleweight, you have like 5 other guys that you could throw into the fucking title picture, right? And also, there's a very solid chance that Strickland in a rematch could beat DDP considering how close the first fight was. And considering he's kind of changed up his style a little bit. And obviously, Khamzat will always be a hard counter to Dricus du Plessis' style. And it's because Dricus du Plessis never really learned how to defensively grapple. First of all, he comes from a kickboxing background. That's why his grappling will always not be good. He's a very good offensive grappler, but defensively he's shit because he's never had to defend takedowns. He's never faced a grappler to the level of Khamzat Chimaev. And also Khamzat Chimaev himself is quite strong. And obviously, there's not really a triangle forming at middleweight. Even if it does form, it will be for a very short period of time. At heavyweight, it's obviously a number 1 and number 2 kind of guys thing with Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gane. And I don't even want to talk about the women's divisions. We can ignore those. So the only division with the dilemma is light heavyweight. What could possibly be another reason for this, right? It's because there's no contenders at light heavyweight. There's literally no contenders at light heavyweight. The top 5 of light heavyweight has been the fucking same since like the last 5 years. Jan Blachowicz, if he picks up 2 more wins, could fight for a world title. Jiri Prochazka, former champion. Carlos Ulberg just became champion. Carlos Ulberg has been in the UFC for a very long time as well. Magomed Ankalaev, former champion, fought for a belt before that as well. Jiri Prochazka, former champion, and fought for the belt afterwards as well. The title picture hasn't changed in a while, dude. And Carlos Ulberg, I understand he's probably the newest of these 3 guys, but he has been in the UFC for a while, dude. For a very long time. There's no real contenders at 205. Who are the fucking contenders at 205? Fucking Ivo Baraniewski, a 1-round fighter. Abdul Rahman Yakiev, a 1-round fighter. Navajo Sterling, who's overrated as fuck and got fucking grapple fucked by Ion Cutelaba. That's the guy? Really? Navajo Sterling? That's your fucking guy? Khalil Roundtree, he's out of the title picture. He lost to fucking Jiri Prochazka and Pereira already. Jan Blachowicz, out of the title picture. There's nobody else in the title picture, right? First of all, half of the light heavyweight roster is moving up to heavyweight. And the only person that I think could be interesting at light heavyweight is RDR, because he is moving up to light heavyweight and there's no grapplers at light heavyweight. The only decent grappler is Ankalaev. And people kind of overrate Ankalaev as a grappler. I don't think in a pure wrestling situation, I don't think he's a better wrestler than RDR, but because he has such better striking and probably will have better setup for his takedowns, that he would be a better wrestler than RDR in an MMA setting, right? But RDR's jiu-jitsu is genuinely fucking good, right? RDR genuinely has very good jiu-jitsu. So at 205, the only person that I can think that might be able to, make the title picture more interesting is RDR moving up from middleweight. There's literally no other contenders at light heavyweight. The only 3 prospects that we have that are Ivo Baraniewski, Abdul Rahman Yakiev, and Navajo Sterling. Other than those 3, I can't name. Who? Fucking Zhang Ming Yang already lost twice. I'm unable to think of anybody else. I researched this before, but there's literally no other light heavyweight contenders. There's no new light heavyweights. Literally everyone has fought everyone, and that's why we are stuck in a triangle dilemma. Now, obviously the clear way to solve this would be to provide new prospects like middleweight, because if middleweight didn't have those new prospects coming in, right, the belt would just switch hands between Strickland, DDP and Chimaev. But we have guys like Imavov, We have guys like Joe Pyfer. We have guys like Hernandez, and Gregory Rodriguez is coming up. We have guys like Borrallo. There's nobody like that at light heavyweight. Khalil Roundtree, you can throw him out of the title picture already. Jan Blachowicz, he's never touching a belt again. So who else? Literally, there's nobody else. There's no one else that you can look at and be like, okay, that guy, he has a chance of fighting for a title. The thing is, the division is in such a bad state that forget about a new champion out of these three guys, right? Out of these three guys, you don't even think another guy is gonna fight for a belt. Who is gonna fight for a belt other than these three guys? Paulo Costa is interesting, but he also beat Azamat Murzakanov, who is small as fuck for light heavyweight. And Paulo Costa, let's be for real, bro, he's getting slammed out by all three of these guys. Paulo Costa makes the division a little bit more interesting, but still, he's a middleweight moving up to light heavyweight. I know he looked good in his last fight, but are we genuinely just gonna sit here and pretend Paulo Costa is a top 5 light heavyweight? He is a top 5 light heavyweight, but are we genuinely gonna pretend that any of these three guys lose to Paulo Costa? Really? Now, another reason for it is the placement of the light heavyweight division, right? There's very few guys that can actually compete at light heavyweight. You see all these light heavyweights moving up to heavyweight. If you're kind of big at light heavyweight, you can just move up to heavyweight. You're kind of small for light heavyweight like Murzakanov, you won't step into light heavyweight in the first place. You'll be a middleweight. So there's very few fighters that actually fill the spot of being at light heavyweight. The one person I think who is an actual light heavyweight is Rainier de Ridder. Other than that, I can't really think of anybody who's actually built like a guy who's supposed to fight at light heavyweight. Carlos Albert, he could easily move up to heavyweight. Yuri Prohaska is also another guy who I think is actually built for light heavyweight. Magomed Ankalaev, he's kind of small for light heavyweight as well. Khalil Roundtree, this guy should be fighting at fucking welterweight. Okay, not welterweight, middleweight, maybe. Paulo Costa, former middleweight. Azamat Murzakanov, he's somehow shorter than a fucking former middleweight. Rakesh is moving up to heavyweight. Jamal Hill is moving up to heavyweight. If you're a good prospect, why would you not go to heavyweight? Or if you're too small for light heavyweight, why would you not just stay at middleweight? Why would you go at 205? Especially with how the heavyweight division is looking. But here's the thing. Because there's so many light heavyweights that could fight at light heavyweight that are fighting at heavyweight instead, light heavyweight is in a power vacuum and there's nobody really good at light heavyweight, so we're gonna see more contenders rise up at light heavyweight in the future, because there's just gonna be like, this division's fucking empty, dude, I could easily become the champion. That's literally what's gonna happen. Because heavyweight, you look at heavyweight is contender wise, it's in a better state than light heavyweight. Because light heavyweight has had the three same guys, Carlos Ulberg, Ankalaev, and Yuri Prochazky, for like the last 5 years. Alex Pereira is now at heavyweight. Cyril Gane, nobody's beating him at heavyweight. Tom Aspinall, he's a fucking problem. Curtis Blades, he's a fucking problem. Rizwan Kuniev, he's a fucking problem. Walter Walker, he's a fucking problem. At heavyweight, you have to go through murderer's row. At light heavyweight, who the fuck are you fighting? Volkan Ozdemir? Bogdan Vuskov? Jan Blachowicz? These are the guys you're supposed to fight in order... Khalil Roundtree? These are the guys you're supposed to fight in order to get a title shot? So in the future, we're gonna see guys... The way... the treatment that heavyweight division gets, like, oh, why won't you just go at heavyweight? Heavyweight is full of bums. You could easily become a champion. That same exact thing is gonna happen to light heavyweight in a few years. That's just how it works. Especially because Alex Pereira left for heavyweight, that left a big hole in the division. So yeah, the obvious thing would be to get more light heavyweights. That's the only thing I can think of. To get more light heavyweight prospects to fix up the division. Other than that, moving up middleweights to 205 isn't gonna work. The only person that I think could have success moving up from middleweight to light heavyweight is RDR, because he was never supposed to be at middleweight in the first place. But middleweights moving up to light heavyweight is not gonna fix it. Shitty light heavyweights moving up to heavyweight isn't gonna help the division either. We have to pump a lot of light heavyweights from the regional scenes. Fucking, I understand And I like what they're doing with now Sterling, giving him an opportunity to break into the top 5. Because that's how the division is gonna progress. If now Sterling beats Jan Blachowicz, you can give him a number 1 contenders fight with fucking Yuri Prohaska. You can make him fight Khalil Rountree. You can make him fight Paulo Costa for a number 1 contenders fight. But obviously, that's if he beats Jan Blachowicz. And we need to fucking fast track these light heavyweights. That's all I'm saying. And that's the way to fix the division. To pump in more light heavyweights from the regional scenes and stuff like that. And not necessarily throw them up there to the wolves, but don't try to build them up as slowly as you're building up other guys in other divisions. Kind of fast track them into the rankings. Because if Zhang Ming Yang is able to be ranked, yeah, you get my point, right? If fucking Johnny Walker is ranked, you get my point, right? So yeah, that's it. That's the light heavyweight division. That's the light heavyweight dilemma. And yeah, that's it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.